It all began one day when Lin is walking down the road. He spots an OnlyFans streamer in a bunny costume, causing his own bunny ears to pop out. As Lin listens and judges her for being a public the streamer girl's chat blows up with fans pointing out that Lin's bunny ears look real. The girl realizes Lin must be a lowly ranked anamorph and asks her simps to gift her rockets if she can knock him down. Afterward, she walks up to Lin and acts surprised by how lifelike his bunny ears are. Once Lin lets his guard down around her, she activates her ability, which sends rings of purple energy beams toward him and knocks him aside. The girl reports her mission successful and her boy toys gift her with rockets. Meanwhile, Lin curses his luck for running into a prankster when he notices a van speeding up toward him. The van sends him flying and the driver comes out and angrily tells Lin not to block the way. As Lin's body courses with pain, he laments how he's always been ridiculed by people with more powerful abilities. This was unfortunately the law of the era's survival of the fittest, and in it, a lowly bunny would be torn apart. As Lin chokes on his worthless blood, the enraged driver approaches him and tells him to pay up for hitting his brand new truck. When Lin doesn't respond, the driver activates his electricity ability and electrocutes Lin for having the audacity to touch his truck. At that moment, Lin wonders if this is the end of his pointless life and wishes he could simply become strong. Suddenly, a mystery voice announces that after 35 million years, it's finally found a suitable host. Meanwhile, Lin continues to get deep fried like KFC's chicken. Moments later, Lin opens his eyes confused. When he asks where he is, a voice introduces itself as Robot 9527. Lin misunderstands the word robot and thinks it's asking for his raw cheeks, so the robot tells him to stick to calling it 9527. The system explains that Lin was saved because he was chosen as a suitable host, so Lin asks if he can choose any skill he wants. The system tells him to dream on, but tells him he can choose a new skill every day at random. Lin figures this is some Season 1 Ben 10 BS, so 9527 explains that it took too much power to revive him, so he doesn't have enough power to select skills. Suddenly, Lin realizes that if he returns to the Lightning Bender with yet another useless skill, this time, he won't respawn. 9527 says it's out of its control and asks if he would like to awaken a skill now. Lin agrees to risk respawning as a ragdoll and chooses to awaken a skill. The system then congratulates him on unlocking an SSS skill enhancement. At that moment, Lin returns to life to the surprise of the walking power grid. Lin's new skill enhances his leg strength, so he leaps high in the air and lands on Truck Kun, making him the first to take revenge on the four-wheeled menace. When the driver sees this, he powers up his sparky boom boom powers to take Lin out, but Lin acts faster and uses his leg strength to rearrange the driver's organs with a kick. The bunny streamer watches as the driver flies across the street, so she cries out for Lin to stay away from her. 9527 informs Lin that his arm strength has also been enhanced to increase power and speed, so Lin begins to picture the things he could do to the bunny girl with those hands. Unfortunately, the idiot girl fainted from fear and Lin was nice enough to cover her with his jacket. As he carried her unconscious body, he noticed her loyal simps telling him to get his grimy rabbit hands off her. In response, Lin informed them that he was now Lord Rabbit to them. The next day in school, some girls gather in class to discuss the news of the boy who interrupted the popular streamer live stream. One of the girls points out that it looks like their bunny-eared classmate, and they all agree it 100% had to be Lin. Just then, Lin walks into the classroom surprised to see the commotion. The girls swam him like he was a free ticket to a Sabriner Carpenter's show and began showering him with undeserved compliments. All the attention reminds Lin of how the driver and the streamer both changed their tunes and apologized when they realized he could actually whoop their bonbons. The two morons immediately hailed Lin as their ultimate role model, giving Lin a massive ego boost, which he owed to the skill he got from 9527. Since Lin hadn't chosen a skill for the day, he summoned 9527 and asked him to do its thing. 9527 skips the previous ceremony and congratulates him on activating the skill called Sowing the World, which is an E-rank skill. Lin immediately pictures himself sowing his seeds with his trusty tool inside all the girls of the world and thinks he's hit the freebie jackpot. However, when the skill doesn't have any effect, he tries to activate the system over and over again till 9527 tells him it's already been activated. Lin wondered how that was possible since there was no baddie dropping to her knees for him, so the system explained that the skill was for handling all seed planting techniques. Frustrated, Lin asked why the system didn't just call it planting, startling the girls in class. Just then, a classmate called out for Lin. It turned out to be Nan, a wind element prodigy. He's surprised at how popular Lin seems to have gotten and offers him a job. Lin asks what type of job he means but remains skeptical since Nan has only ever treated him like a doormat before. Nan explains that a special club is hiring waitstaff and assures Lin that his looks would be an extra advantage if he did it. Lin is offended that Nan actually suggested a club for curved men to him, so he asks Nan if he's a regular spender there. Nan tries to brag about his spending when he realizes he fell for Lin's trick. He insists that he's straighter than a flagpole, but Lin teases him for trying to stay deep in the closet. Nan gets mad and almost picks a fight when the teacher arrives and warns him he'll be punished for fighting in school. Upon hearing this, they all take their seats and Nan continues to give Lin the stink eye. The teacher announces that next week is the citywide exam, and after, there will be a special test for those who awaken powers to determine if they'll get into Lingwu University. Lin was shocked to hear about Lingwu University. It was founded to train gifted individuals, and the entrance exam was a way to gauge the students' abilities. Before Lin was reborn, he was only at the bronze 2-star level, but now that he has 9,527, he wonders if he'd stand a chance. At this, Lin raises his hand to tell the teacher something, but as soon as the teacher notices him, he tells Lin not to bother with the exam since his pathetic skill would only embarrass the school. These words hit Lin like a rock to the head, while the rest of the class laughed at him for getting cooked by the teacher. However, Lin insisted on joining the exam anyway, to everyone's surprise. The teacher repeats that his skills were just average and would only ruin the school's reputation, but Lin secretly hoped to awaken an S-rank skill that would wipe the floor with his ops. When the teacher saw Lin's determination, he proposed that if Lin could make it to the top 10 in the citywide exam, he'd give him a shot. Lin tells Four Eyes that he's got a deal, but the teacher tells him to let his results speak for himself. At this, Lin decides to give it his all to get into Lingwu University no matter what. After school, Lin rushes past the gates lost in thought. The university was crazy expensive, so he needed to save every penny he could get. Just then, a limo pulled up and almost took over Truck Kun's job. Lin wondered what was going on as two girls stepped out, and the blue-haired one, Jen, asked if he was the bunny. As Lin stared at her giant features, he knew he was ready to be any animal she wanted. That was until he realized that she had called him Little Bunny, which made him wonder if the ladies couldn't see he was a full-grown man under the ears. He then cleared his throat to reintroduce himself with a rose in his mouth, and with Delulu in his head, he told the girls to save his number as Handsome Lin. Just then, the blonde one told Lin to stop joking around, causing Lin to recognize her as the degenerate streamer from the street, Min. She handed over the jacket to Lin, who was surprised she was also a student. Min then told Lin to keep her tight suit activities a secret, even though she's literally famous for it. Just then, Jen called out for Min and asked if Lin was the one with the beast transformation skill. Min confirmed this and explained that Lin easily beat a bronze rank 2-star electricity type. Jen was underwhelmed when she heard it was just a bronze loser, but Min insisted Lin had to be stronger. Lin interrupted and offered to show the girls a demonstration of what he could do, but Jen shut it down and said they were leaving, desperate to get her number. Lin suggested they spar sometime, but Jen was offended that someone so lowly would challenge a silver rank like her. Jen says she never backs down from challenges and agrees to spar with Lin in a week to see who gets the best of 3. Lin slips into simp mode and agrees to anything she wants, but when she hears him address her informally, she wonders how he dares to call her first name. Regardless, she agrees to stop being a Karen and to fulfill all of his other requests if she loses. Lin begins to imagine his censored requests while Min advises him to give up on the competition. However, Lin assures the girls he won't give up so easily as they drive off. Later, when Lin hops on his scooter, he receives a delivery order from a customer asking for help to prevent him from being beaten up in exchange for any price he wants. When Lin sees he can determine the price, he hops on his bike and speeds up to help the rich customer. Meanwhile, in the alley beside an internet cafe, a round kid named John was crying his eyes out as he offered 2 men money to spare him. The men planned to take his money and beat him to death anyway when they heard a voice behind them. When they turned, they saw Lin and his ridiculous bunny ears holding a bat, telling them they'd need to pay for being bullies. The men ask if Lin happens to have a death wish and prepare to rush him when Lin suddenly snaps his fingers. At that moment, a group of bloodthirsty and underpaid delivery riders appear behind Lin and ask who dares to cause trouble in their territory. When the 2 men see the mob, they take off running, wondering how Lin was able to gather so many people. Upon seeing this, John is surprised he managed to call the boss of the area, so he quickly stands beside Lin and tells the bullies never to show their faces again or his big brother will beat them up. Zhang then thanks Lin for saving him and asks to refer to him as a big brother from now on, but Lin says he doesn't need any little brothers and only wants cash. At this, Zhang introduces himself as the most handsome student in the whole city, while flashing a receipt for the 30,000 yuan he just sent. Lin almost drools over the money as he realizes he can pay off all the other writers and still have close to the amount he needs for tuition. He agrees to humor the chubby kid and accepts him as his brother, asking why those men were so angry at him anyway. Zhang revealed that he was using a female account in a game and got married to one of the men. When the man asked for a voice note, he tried to use a voice changer, but the man happened to be sitting right in front of him and was not happy to know his wife was packing as much as he was. Lin does a spit take as he realizes he just adopted a madman as his brother, so he tells Zhang that he needs to go back to work. Zhang offers to drop him off in his Rolls Royce, but Lin refuses before he wakes up with his back door wide open. As he drives off, Lin praises his luck for bringing him a ton of cash and allowing him to meet a goddess, but now he has to study for his citywide exam. The next day, when the teacher begins the class, Lin laments how exhausted he is from reading all night, hoping the teacher will tell them what to focus on before his blood is made up entirely of coffee. At this, Lin summons 19527 and asks for his new skill. 19527 laments being woken up from sleep, which surprises Lin cause how on earth does that even work? The system then congratulates Lin for receiving the skill of photographic memory, which allows him to imprint everything he's seen in his mind. Shocked, Lin decides to give it a try and easily imprints a formula from the board. When he sees how easy it is, Lin picks up a textbook and starts copying and pasting everything into his mind. With this new skill, he figures no one can stop him in the final exam. Suddenly, the teacher angrily walks up to him and slams his hand on the table, startling Lin. The teacher demands to know why Lin is smirking at a physics textbook, so Lin tells him he thought of something happy. When Lin tells him that the exam would be a walk in the park for him, the teacher gets even more enraged, insisting Lin has never scored high enough to qualify for room temperature IQ. At this, Lin hands the teacher the textbook and tells him to choose any page for him to recite, and he could even do it backwards. However, the teacher thinks he's being ridiculous and tells him to give up on the exam and not shame the school any further. When Lin insists, the teacher starts with something easy and tells Lin to complete the second half of a phrase, which he immediately completes. The teacher can't believe his ears, so he hits Lin with a tougher phrase, but once again, Lin completes it with ease. The students watch in amazement as the teacher throws another question and Lin answers it while looking bored to death. Suddenly, the teacher gloats over Lin finally getting one wrong until he realizes that Lin actually answered it backwards. No one can believe what they're witnessing from the class loser. Lin then exits the class, promising to return on the day of the exam, while his teacher probably sinks into a coma. Days later, the results from the exams come out and the students learn that someone from their school beat out Jen as the top scorer. Everyone wonders who could have pulled this off, and Nan almost stops breathing when he discovers it's none other than Lin. Lin brags about being that outstanding and goes off to study his opponents in the ability exam. 10 days later at the ability exam venue, the students explode with excitement in an arena as the presenter announces the beginning of the next stage of exams. He welcomes the top 100 principals and companies in attendance, then welcomes Jen from the 18th school who took the top spot in the final exams. At this, Jen immediately causes an explosion, making the presenters wonder what's wrong with her till his assistant informs him that she was only first place in the first two exams. Just then, Lin showed his shameless face and called out to Jen, who was disgusted at herself for losing to a background character like him. Jen admitted losing the bet and asked him what he wanted in return, but Lin insisted it was all a joke, unless she wanted to go out for dinner with him. Jen's cheeks turned red from embarrassment as she apologized for calling him weak. Lin immediately turned into a nosebleed Pinocchio at the sight of her cute face and excessive chesticles. Just then, a reporter spots them and asks if the two top scorers in the country are together. When Jen denied the allegations, the presenter asked Lin how a lowly bunny was planning on surviving the exams, but Lin explained he was there for first place. The crowd immediately burst into laughter at the thought of him winning and cheered for Jen to clap him into oblivion. Before the presenter could continue, Lin snatched the microphone and humbly said he didn't have much to say to the audience except that they should pray for their candidates not to run into him or he'd middle finger them. Just like that, Lin stood in the middle of the auditorium and pissed off everyone. When Lin was done basking in his MC energy, the presenter grabbed the microphone back and told him to watch what he said. Meanwhile, the other opponents stood back angrily telling Lin to go up against him if he dared, but Lin pretended they were just mosquitoes in his ear. After, the students were assigned their numbers and Lin was given number 66. The presenter then explained the rules, saying the battles would be in one-on-one format where the winner advances and the loser is eliminated. Their respective numbers were being sent to their phones at that exact moment, and as everyone discovered what they received, the presenter announced that since there was an odd number of participants, someone would be chosen at random to advance to the next round without fighting. Lin yawned as the guy beside him prayed to all the gods he could think of to make them pick him. However, when the numbers were spun, they announced that number 66 had received the exemption. Lin was surprised that he got picked since he didn't cheat this time, while the rest of the students who were hoping to get a piece of him were enraged that he'd gotten so lucky. Now that the order of the match had been set, the presenter invited the participants of the first match to take the stage. Lin relaxed in the bleachers as he smirked over his luck. When the participants of the first match showed on the screen, he was excited to see Zhen would be going up in the first match. However, it didn't last long as Lin was unprepared to see that Zhen defeated her opponent in an instant, proving why she was given a silver rank. The guy beside Lin explained that her performance was expected from a silver rank ice user, which impressed Lin even more. He decided he needed to study his opponents even harder so he could be worthy of her. 10 minutes later, the one-on-one battles continue with two flashy type awakeners, seemingly evenly matched. However, Lin laments being tired from seeing the most flashing lights since Christmas. At this, he summons 9527 to generate a new skill for the day, so the system silently sorts through the options. Lin comments that the system has been getting lazy and doesn't want to talk to him anymore, so 9527 says he can't be bothered with a noob. After, the system congratulates Lin on gaining physical enhancement, an S-rank skill. Lin is relieved to finally see something good after days of useless farming skills, making him question if 9527 was garbage. At this, 9527 warns him to watch it, or he'll never see anything nice again. Lin activates the enhancement and his body immediately gets so ripped that his clothes get torn to pieces. As his biceps triple in size and his abs see the light for the first time in their lives, Lin realizes he's finally made his debut as a muscle god with strength abilities. He gets carried away with flexing his unearned muscles when a group of girls begin screaming from embarrassment. Lin asks if they've never seen a handsome guy before, but the girls break the news that his ugly ducklings are on display. As Lin looks down and registers the hole in his pants, it turns into that recurring nightmare of you in underwear, causing Lin to scream his head off. Later, round 2 is declared over, with 101 participants advancing, so they draw the next exemption, and it turns out to be Lin yet again. The next day, the exact same thing happens and Lin is given an exemption, though he doesn't look happy. By day 3, even Lin was annoyed to hear that he had once again received the exemption for the exam. The presenter asks how he feels to be luckier than a 4-leaf clover, but Lin laments not being able to get his tool wet with the blood of his enemies. Meanwhile, the other students who've now been decorated with bruises and swellings can't accept that Lin keeps getting off scot-free. Nan grabs the microphone and protests against Lin being equally ranked with them when he hasn't gotten a single tooth knocked out. Nan is so determined to see Lin suffer that he withdraws from the match, so they're no longer an odd number. Upon hearing this, the presenter grabs the microphone and excitedly announces that Lin will now have to fight in the next round. As his opponent looks over at him menacingly, Lin casually stretches his arms as he gets ready to test his strength after his enhancement. After sorting out the arrangement, they announce that number 88, Diane, will be Lin's first opponent, so the crowd cheers him on to teach Lin a lesson. They both step into the ring and Lin isn't fazed by the blue-haired Killua wannabe. Suddenly, Diane makes a sign telling Lin he's dead meat. However, Lin simply face palms and wonders why everyone is so against him. Moments later, the presenter declares the match open, so Diane begins by talking smack to Lin, claiming he'll crush Lin in an instant and prevent him from using his skill. When Lin barely reacts to the threats, Diane gets pissed and promises to torture Lin slowly and give him a humiliating defeat. Lin says okay again, angering Diane to take action and attack by throwing a ball of electricity toward Lin. The impact causes a huge explosion, but Lin was able to evade the attack, calling all the opponents that faced Diane weaklings. Frustrated, Diane sends an even more powerful lightning blast toward Lin, but Lin moves so fast that he creates after images of himself, confusing Diane on which to attack. Diane then resorts to his most dangerous attack and begins to charge up his lightning ocean. At this, Lin remembers that lightning skills were 3 times more powerful than other skills, which is how he died some days ago. If he got hit with Diane's ultimate move, the consequences would be unimaginable, so he speeds forward to stop Diane before he can attack. Just then, Lin appears in front of Diane and is about to punch him. Even though Diane sees the punch coming, he figures it can't be anything too serious from a weakling anymore who hasn't even transformed. Seconds later, Diane goes flying across the stage and realizes he miscalculated. As he hits the floor unconscious, the presenter announces that he's been knocked out with a single punch and declares Lin as the winner. The crowd goes wild and is amazed at how strong Lin is to be able to take out such an opponent. Principals of rival universities even begin to fight over the chance to take Lin into their school, though they aren't so sure of him after just one match. As they discuss, Lin is paired with a bronze 8-star power type for another match. One of the principals points out that in the previous match, he watched carefully and Lin didn't use any mana at all. His colleague calls it impossible since such strength was comparable to at least a bronze 8-star power type. He wonders how terrifying Lin's physical strength must be, and they both agree this year's newbies are definitely ones to watch. The next day, Lin is paired with an even more powerful opponent, Shin. He is a bronze, 9-star wolf animorph who seems to be bursting with excess mana. As Lin watches Shen's terrifying aura closely, he wonders if he should transform too, so he surrounds himself with a fiery aura 2 times larger than his opponent. Moments later, the big-for-nothing puppy falls to his knees to beg for mercy and admit defeat, allowing Lin to win by default. In the next round, the same thing happens again, as the girl with a sword admits defeat before Lin even sends a single attack, so Lin wins that too. The round after that, his opponent withdraws and even asks for Lin's autograph, allowing Lin to win and end up in the top 8. Even Lin is shocked as he stands among the other finalists, while Jen looks over at him intensely. Later, Jen rests in the grass, wondering why it's so hard to find an opponent. He thought something interesting would happen during the ability exams, but so far it's just been a waste of his time. At that moment, 9527 appears without being summoned, which turns out to be perfect timing for Lin, who hasn't drawn a new skill. 19527 gives him spear proficiency, so he can skillfully wield any spear, but Lin is not too impressed since anyone hardly uses a spear in today's modern age. Suddenly, Jen approaches Lin from behind. Lin immediately switches to simp mode as he asks Jen if she came all this way just to see him. However, as Jen responds, all Lin can focus on is the view of her chest warriors fighting against gravity from below. Jen takes her sit and informs him of a team she's putting together to explore a bronze dungeon and asks if he's interested in joining. Lin is surprised by the proposition. The dawn of this mana era had created countless dungeons filled with mana beasts and treasure. These beasts were like treasure troves and sometimes produced mana pearls that could help awakeners grow stronger. Lin immediately thinks the mission would count as a date and pictures Jen holding onto him for protection while he lives out his macho man fantasy. However, Jen breaks the news that there's 6 others besides them for safety reasons, crushing Lin's dreams of rescuing his damsel in distress. Lin accepts her proposition even though he hates that others will be there. Jen counts him in and tells him she'll contact him when the time comes. As she turns to leave, Lin asks if she'd like to continue their chat over some coffee, but Jen tells him to prepare well for his matches cause she won't be going easy on him. On the day of the finals, the entire crowd is full of Jen worshippers and simps who want her to bury Lin alive. As Lin and Jen stand on stage, the presenter announces that their final match is between Lin, the shameless bunny, and Jen, the goddess. After the presenter hypes up the match, Jen points at Lin and assures him she has no intention of letting first place escape her again. Lin tells her he doesn't really care about the first place, and if it wasn't for the interview where he ran his mouth like a tap, he would just admit the defeat to her. However, he turns around and tells her to admit defeat because he won't be going easy on her. When the presenter sees both of them are ready, he declares the match open. Lin powers up his fist for a first strike, but Jen easily deflects it, to his surprise. She then goes behind Lin, who is stunned by how fast she is, and kicks him in the back where it'll hurt when he's 30. Lin slides across the stage and stops himself from going far as he marvels at how powerful Jen's kick is. He acknowledges that if it wasn't for his physical enhancement, Jen would have knocked him out instantly. However, the match was only just beginning as Lin charges toward her to retaliate. He sends high-speed punches at her, but Jen is able to block every single one of them with ease. Lin begins to feel frustrated as he misses every swing, while Jen mocks him for being too slow as she sneaks up behind him again. By the time Lin turns back to see what she's trying to do, Jen drives her elbow into his back and knocks him flat for the first time. As Lin lies there, Jen tells him to give up because even though his fitness is extraordinary, his technique is garbage. Lastly, she taunts him as she shows how she hasn't even used her ice ability yet. Lin manages to pick himself off the ground as he agrees he can't allow himself to keep getting clapped multiple times in a row. Suddenly, he remembers something useful and has an idea. He tells the presenter he needs a timeout, which confuses everyone, but he leaps off the stage before they can stop him. There, Lin grabs a mop and asks the presenter if he can use a weapon in the match. The presenter tells him there's never been such a shameless request in the history of the match, but Jen confidently tells him to let Lin use it, thinking Lin must be looking down on her. When Lin returns to the stage with the mop, Jen asks if they can begin. Lin responds by announcing that his weapon is called a mop spear, made from the cleaning lady's mop. Lin shows off his spear skills, causing Jen to recognize that something seems off about him. Lin insists that if she won't attack him, he will, so he rushes forward to hit her with the stick. Lin tries to dodge the swings, but Lin is able to move expertly thanks to the skill he's now proud of. Suddenly, the spear spanks Jen on her assets, and even she hates to admit his technique is good. She calls him a creep and promises to unalive him, but Lin insists that it was simply muscle memory. Before Lin can explain further, Jen fires ice projectiles at Lin, who manages to dodge them. Jen then activates her ice seal, telling Lin that he's forced her hand now. Lin laments how freezing it is as his body begins to feel slow. He realizes Jen casts her skills too quickly, so he won't be able to attack if he doesn't morph. Just then, ice crystals begin to rain down around Lin, and when he looks up, a giant ice crystal comes crashing down above him. As the ice cloud blocks their vision, Jen tells the presenter to call an ambulance and declare the results. Since Jen seems like the only one left standing, the presenter is about to declare her the winner when Lin suddenly emerges from the smoke in his anima form, urging Jen not to rush off since they don't always have alone time together. He charges at her again, but this time, he's much faster than before. Jen is shocked by his speed, so she activates her ice armor to protect herself. Then she takes a wide stance to brace herself for impact. When Lin hits, his thrust is strong enough to penetrate her armor with his tool, shocking her. As her hands go numb, she wonders if she's about to lose a second time, but she refuses to take any more L's. As Lin tries hard to break through her shield, cold air begins to swarm around Jen until she activates her advanced silver 2-star powers. Lin knows that Jen can get hurt from the slightest mistake during her advancement, so he calls out for the judge to point out that Jen is cheating. The presenter tells him she's only advancing in battle, and even if she was cheating, he wasn't one to talk with all the stunts he's pulled. As Jen watches them, she realizes Lin didn't attack her when he had the chance during her advance. She thinks he's kind of cute for it, so she calls him back to the match to continue. Lin agrees to go on and resumes his stance for an attack. However, Jen warns him to be careful as she's even more powerful than before. At this, more ice crystals begin to fly toward Lin, who struggles to dodge them. Mid-air, he realizes Jen really is faster and stronger than before. His spear gets lodged in the ground as he loses control of it and gets hit with several ice crystals. Jen doesn't hold back as she suspends all the ice crystals around her for a final strike. Then she sends them rushing toward Lin, who figures he's finished if they successfully land a critical hit. Lin manages to block the hit with arms, but they go numb from the impact. His body might be comparable to a bronze 9-star, but his mana is only a bronze 3-star, which can't endure an attack that fierce. Lin realizes he can't let this go on and speeds forward to Jen. Jen can't believe he has that much explosive power, so she tries to launch another wave of ice thorns, but before she can, Lin sneaks up behind her and puts her in his grip. Jen tells him to let her go and tries to struggle her way out, but Lin refuses and accidentally grabs her forbidden fruit. Jen watches as Lin's hands linger long enough to leave palm prints, so she struggles even harder to break free and snuff the life out of him. During the struggle, they both end up stumbling to the ground. Lin tries to stop her from getting hurt and carries her up, pointing out that she's bleeding while Jen wonders why he cares so much. Lin tells her he'll never let go unless she admits defeat, but Jen refuses. Lin then warns her that he'll be forced to use his Mad Bunny bite to make her admit defeat. Jen can't believe he'd stoop that low, but Lin says he'd do anything to win. Upon hearing this, Jen takes a deep breath and tells the presenter she lost. Immediately after she says this, Lin drops to the ground unconscious, shocking Jen. She quickly rushes to check what's wrong with him, but Lin's eyes begin to close slowly. When he goes unconscious, he sees the shampoo commercial version of Jen, asking why he would do that to her. Lin wonders what she's talking about when he suddenly notices bunny paws reaching out for her. Jen screams and tells the mischievous rabbit not to come near her, and that's when Lin realizes he's the mischievous rabbit, and wonders how he turned into a live plushie. Suddenly, Lin wakes up in a bed with bandages over his head. 9527 is glad to see he's awake, so Lin tells him about the crazy dream he just had. At this, 9527 informs him his skill has been upgraded to Mischievous Rabbit. Lin cusses the system out for causing that weird dream, so 9527 explains that since Lin was in a coma, he didn't want him to miss the skill draw. Lin says he wouldn't mind missing a day since all he's been getting are useless E-rank skills, but he decides to try again now that he's awake. 9527 congratulates him on receiving an SSS rank skill called Dimensional Awakening, and Lin can't believe how lucky he got. Suddenly, 9527 realizes that since Lin has already activated Beast Mode, this would be a good chance for a merge. Lin tried to stop it from making decisions without asking him, but the merging was already successful, and the system attached something to Lin which surprised him. The system announces that Lin has become a Dorabman, which is a mischievous rabbit with dimensional skills capable of making your wish come true. Lin asks what the pouch on him is, so the system says it's an inventory pocket that will allow him to store anything he wants inside. Lin is pleasantly surprised since it usually belongs to cultivators, so 9527 adds that he's also unlocked the new skill called the Desired Door. This allows him to open a door next to him, which will take him anywhere within a range of 5 kilometers. The system then creates a door for Lin to try out, and as Lin walks through it, 9527 tells him to think of a destination within the 5-kilometer range. At this, Lin thinks hard and says he'd like to go to a random spot downstairs. Suddenly, the door activates and Lin ends up falling through space and landing on his back. As Lin grumbles about the pain, a damsel enters distress at the sight of Lin's face. The girl is Zhu, and she quickly grabs a knife and demands to know how Lin entered her room. Lin is surprised the lower floor is the owner's house, so he tries to explain to Zhu. The next day, Lin arrives at a coffee shop. Grateful Zhu allowed him to go so he could meet with his goddess, Jen, who texted him out of the blue. Just then, Jen calls out to him to meet with the rest of them. Lin is pissed to see the other NPCs sitting with this goddess. Jen asks how Lin is even more injured after just one night, but when Lin brushes it off, Jen tells him to be more careful since they'll be going to the dungeon soon. She then explains that she called him over so he can get to know the explorer team made up of Zhang and Min, who he's already met before. Lin then cries tears of sadness when he realizes she didn't call him up for a quickie. Zhang turns out to be a 9-star healing type and offers to take care of Lin's injuries, while Min is an 8-star sound type. Lin also introduces Cheng, their team's strongest combatant and tank top ambassador. Cheng is a 9-star fire type and commends Lin on his match with Jen the other day. Jen adds that there are 2 other members, but they had to deal with getting permission from school and couldn't make it that day. She then asks Lin if he's received his acceptance letter from Lingwu University, so Lin says he received a stack of papers just that morning. As he remembers receiving the papers, he can't believe how a university he never dared to dream of was now inviting him to study with them. At this, Jen asks Lin which school he intends to choose. This catches Lin off guard as he wonders if maybe Jen might be warming up to him. Lin says he's leaning more towards studying at Lingwu University and asks if she's thinking of going to the same school as him. Jen blushes as she admits she does want to attend the same university as him, but she claims it's only so she can defeat him in front of the whole school. Lin doesn't mind and tells her to give the order whenever she's ready, but Jen says they need to talk about serious matters now. The place they're exploring is a copper-ranked dungeon, and their target is a spirit beast known as the Ice Fox. They need to obtain the gem inside the spirit fox, but because the ice foxes live in packs, it would be too much for Jen to handle on her own. This is why she wants to ask for everyone's help. She knows there's no other reason for them to enter the dungeon other than to help her out, but Min insists she doesn't need to talk like they're strangers. Cheng agrees and points out that it'll count as training for them, and John adds that they'll also be able to learn from Big Brother Lin. Lin tells Jen that he's lucky to be invited by a goddess and counts it as an honor to team up with all of them, but he wonders what level 8 and 9 talents want with a level 2 novice like him. Jen reminds him not to call her a goddess and just call her by her name instead. Then she suggests they set the departure time for 3 days from then, and they'll gather at Lin's house. On the day of departure, Lin packs his bags for the trip and calls out to 9527 to hit him with the skill of the day. 9527 congratulates him on unlocking the skill of culinary mastery, which is yet again another E-ranked skill. Lin adds it to his collection with language mastery and medical mastery and laments how his recent skills have been so random. 9527 reminds him how lucky he is to have opened the space system, which prompts Lin to ask what the use of that space pouch is. 9527 tells him to try putting his backpack inside, so a bright light wraps around Lin's bag and sucks it into the dimensional pocket. Lin tells 9527 it's amazing that such a big bag can fit inside without feeling heavy at all, so 9527 informs him that all items in his room can even be stored inside. Lin is surprised to hear this when a horn blares from the outside. It turns out to be the members of Zhen's party in a truck, so Lin tells them he'll be right down. Later in the truck, Min invades Lin's crotch space to get a good look at his dimensional pocket. The rest of the team also stared at him in amazement as Lin stored a long tool in his wide space, making John wonder how it was possible to awaken a dual system. Once the tool fit inside him, Jen commented how rare the skill was and told him he was too overpowered, while Min wanted to know if she could touch it. Lin screamed and told her not to take advantage of him, but Min insisted it was just her first time seeing a space skill. Shen commends Lin on knowing how to joke around. Then he announces that they've finally arrived as he points forward. Lin takes a look and is shocked by what he sees. He gets out of the truck to take a closer look, and there, he sees a huge purple portal radiating with energy, surrounded by a couple of scientists. Lin then wonders if this is the infamous dungeon entrance. No one knew when exactly the dungeons appeared, but evidence suggests that they're related to the revival of spiritual energy as they contain spirit beasts inside. Although spirit beasts can enter into the human world, for some unknown reason, they rarely do. However, humans can't afford to let their guard down and have to defend the portals. Therefore, even though the state doesn't pay much attention to copper and silver rank dungeons, they still send government staff to handle registration and guard it, so they're basically the last line of defense between the human world and the unknown world. When they get to the front of the line, the officials tell them the number of people entering that day is already full, so they have to register for the following day. As they turn back, Lin takes one more look at the portal and notices the spiritual energy at that spot seems more intense than in other areas. Suddenly, Min appears and asks what her little rabbit is up to. When Lin addresses her by her full name, Min tells him not to be so formal since he calls Jen her first name too. Min then suggests they head back to the truck for a nap so she can study his magic bag too. Just then, another adventurer notices the group and thinks they look very wealthy, especially since he recognizes Jan. He then tells the rest of his group that Jen's group is full of fat prey like Jan, who is the young master of a thriving corporation. Yang-hu, the silver rank leader of the group, tells his men to follow them and wait for them to enter the dungeon where they'll attack immediately. The group of bandits called the Xunglang Group were regulars at the dungeon who specialized in taking care of weak and wealthy explorers. At this, they intended to show their new bratty visitors that the dungeon would become their graves. The next day, Lin and the rest of the group finally enter through the dungeon's portal. Moments later, the group appears on the other side to a completely different world. Lin is surprised. This is what the dungeon looks like since the space is incredibly large. Jen tells the others to get a move on it since their destination was still deep inside the dungeon, which would take at least 2 days to reach. They agree, and then Jen tells Min to keep an eye on the surroundings. Min tells her not to worry as she's already activated her radar for scanning, as she has the ability to emit radar waves like a bat. Lin warns her to be cautious as they'll still have to keep watch, while Jen tells everyone to move out. As the group heads in, a scout from the Xunglang group watches them closely. He asked Yang-hu if they should make a move already, but Yang-hu said there was no rush since they could easily be spotted. He suggested they wait till they enter the forest, then they'll give them their special welcome. Later, some big horned sheep were grazing peacefully when a huge explosion occurred and wiped them out. Lin scolded Shen and Diane for causing trouble, pointing out that the sheep's fur could have fetched them some money. After the idiots apologized, Lin told them to search for anything else that might be of value when Min spotted 2 gemstones. Suddenly, the group spots what seems to be a pack of black wolves. However, Jen informs them that it's only a separated wolf and warns them not to be hasty to attack. If the rest of the pack finds their comrade injured, their attacks get even stronger. Lin asks what happens if the one that dies happens to be their leader, but John warns that it won't be that easy since the pack leader won't actively fight. Lin suggests that if the wolf doesn't come to them, he'll go find it as he activates his dimension door. He then tells everyone to wait till he returns as he steps through the portal. Will Lin be able to take on the wolf leader alone? And how will they survive against the Xunglang group? To find out, comment, "I want Lin's version of the Sao the World skill," leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.